You're walking through a cold forest. The air around you is the temperature it should be. The temperature everything is. Then the ground changes. Steam rises from somewhere ahead. You move toward it and find water sitting still in a shallow pool. And when you put your hand in, it's warm. Not sun-warmed, not body temperature warm, hot. Water that is hot and rising from the earth itself in a place where nothing should be generating heat. You have no word for this. You have no explanation. But your hand is in it, and the warmth is real, and something in you has just decided this place is different from every other place you've ever been. For most of human history, this was not a minor discovery. We have a tendency to look at geothermal springs through the lens of what they eventually became: Roman bathhouses, Japanese onsen, Icelandic wellness pools, weekend spa destinations. But strip all of that away and what you have is something far stranger. Water that is hot because the earth is hot. Steam rising in a forest where nothing should be steaming. A pool that maintains its temperature through winter, through storms, through everything. Because its heat source is not the sun, which sets, but the planet itself, which doesn't. For a brain with no concept of geothermal activity, no understanding of tectonic heat or underground water circulation, no category for what this thing even is, that's extraordinary. That's not a resource. That's an event. Let's start with what we can reconstruct from the evidence. Hot springs appear in the sacred geography of nearly every ancient culture that lived near one. In Japan, the concept of onsen, the ritual bathing spring, dates back thousands of years and is woven into the country's oldest religious texts. The Japanese mythology of hot springs credits their existence to the gods, specifically to a divine act of creation rather than any geological process. In the Celtic tradition, springs of all kinds, particularly thermal ones, were inhabited by spirits, nymphs, or goddesses, beings that needed to be honored before the water could safely be used. The Norse called certain hot springs holy, and some appear in the Eddas as sites of divine gathering. In the Americas, indigenous peoples across the Rockies, the Andes, and the Pacific Northwest attributed healing and spiritual properties to thermal springs long before any European contact. In Africa, geothermal springs near the Great Rift Valley, the same region where human beings first evolved, appear in the oral traditions of multiple communities as places associated with healing, ritual, and the presence of something beyond the ordinary. On the other side of the world, in New Zealand, the Maori relationship with geothermal areas is one of the oldest and most sophisticated in the world. Cooking in geothermal vents, bathing in calibrated pools, understanding through generations of careful observation the different temperatures and mineral compositions of different springs, different languages, different continents, different cosmologies, the same essential response. This water is not ordinary. Something is here. This convergence is not coincidence. It's the same cognitive pattern explored throughout this series. The human brain encountering something for which it has no category, and immediately reaching for the most consistent explanation available. Something with intention did this. Something alive is here. Something that can, in theory, be approached, honored, and perhaps asked for something in return. But the response to hot springs went beyond the mythological. Unlike earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, events that arrive violently and depart, a hot spring stays. It's there tomorrow. It's there in a month. You can return to it. And that permanence produced something different from the terror and mythologizing of a one-time disaster. It produced a relationship. In 1901, archaeologists excavating beneath the Roman baths in Bath, England, made a discovery that captures this better than almost any other site in the world. At the bottom of the sacred spring, the same spring that had been considered holy by Celtic peoples before the Romans ever arrived, they found thousands of small lead tablets, curled, folded, thrown into the water over centuries, each one inscribed with a personal message, a name, a grievance, a request. Some were prayers for healing, some were curses against thieves, some were expressions of gratitude for something received. All of them were addressed to Sulis, the goddess of the spring, who the Romans later merged with Minerva without replacing because whatever was in the water was clearly older than Rome. People had been throwing their most urgent private wishes into this specific pool of warm water for over 2,000 years. The prayers changed language, from Celtic to Latin to something in between. The goddess got a new name. But the fundamental act, the belief that this particular warm water was a place where requests could be made and heard, persisted continuously across every political and cultural transition that touched the region. That persistence is remarkable. It tells us something about what ancient humans actually experienced when they found a hot spring that mythology and prayer records don't fully capture. The warmth was immediate and physical in a way that most sacred sites aren't. You didn't observe the spring from a distance. You got in. The warmth surrounded you. The minerals changed the quality of the water against your skin. The smell of sulfur filled the air. Strange, slightly otherworldly. Not like anything in ordinary experience. The steam reduced visibility at the edges, making the space feel enclosed and separate from the surrounding landscape. Every sensory signal said, "This is different. This is not outside. This is inside something. Something that is warm because it is alive." The healing properties of thermal springs weren't entirely wrong either, just explained incorrectly. We know now that hot spring water is rich in minerals, sulfur, silica, calcium, magnesium, and that soaking in it genuinely reduces inflammation, relieves certain skin conditions, and affects circulation. Ancient humans didn't understand the chemistry, but they observed the outcomes. People with joint pain who bathed regularly in certain springs felt better. People with certain skin conditions improved. The healing wasn't imaginary. The explanation for it was. And so the spring became a medicine, a temple, and a message system simultaneously. Because those three things were, in the ancient mind, not separate categories at all. There's a detail in the archaeological record at Bath that is easy to overlook but worth sitting with. Among the thousands of cursed tablets recovered from the sacred spring, researchers found several written by people who were clearly not wealthy, not powerful, not connected to any formal religious institution. Ordinary people who had been wronged, who had had something stolen, who had been deceived, who had suffered some injustice that the ordinary world offered them no recourse for. And they came to the warm water, and they wrote down what had happened to them and they threw it in. They were not using the spring as a tourist attraction or a relaxation destination. They were using it as a court, as the one place in their world where the gap between their smallness and the enormity of what had been done to them felt, if only briefly, bridgeable, where an appeal could be made to something larger than the social structures that had failed them. That's not primitive. That's deeply, recognizably human. Today, you have access to hot springs as wellness tourism, mineral baths, geothermal swimming pools. You know what they are: superheated groundwater, geothermal gradients, dissolved minerals. You can look up the specific temperature and chemical composition of almost any hot spring on Earth before you visit. And yet, there is something that still happens when you actually get into one. The warmth that comes from somewhere underground rather than from the sun. The steam, the smell, the sense of the pool existing at a temperature independent of the weather around it. Warm when it should be cold, constant when everything else shifts. Your rational mind knows exactly what is happening. Something else in your nervous system doesn't entirely care. The same response that made ancient humans pause at the edge of that first steaming pool, hand outstretched toward impossible warmth, is still running somewhere beneath your understanding of geothermal science. Still registering the strangeness, still noting that this water is alive in a way that ordinary water isn't, still arriving, if only for a moment, at the same wordless conclusion that every human who has ever found one has arrived at before you. This place is different. Something is here.